Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise, get straight to the essential knowledge from our sources, helping you become truly well informed. Today, we're plunging into the extraordinary life of Charles Bronson. That name, it just immediately brings up an image, doesn't it? Tough, stoic, a man of few words, but wow, what a presence on screen. You probably know him from maybe Death Wish or The Great Escape. But prepare yourself. This deep dive is going to uncover a story that's much richer and frankly more surprising, maybe more human than you might expect. So, our mission today, it's to unpack the incredible journey of Charles Dennis Buczynski, that was his birth name, the man who became Charles Bronson. We're going to trace his path from, well, unimaginable poverty right up to global superstardom. We'll look at that unique screen persona, explore some surprising things about a personal life, and examine the roles that, both defined him and sometimes let him break the mold. You might think you've got Charles Bronson figured out, but trust us, you're probably in for a few aha moments as we sort of peel back the layers here. Okay, let's dive right in. Start at the beginning. Charles Bronson, this icon of cinematic toughness. His life began in conditions that are, well, hard for us to even picture today. What was that early world like?
Oh, it was incredibly harsh, really. He was born Charles Dennis Buczynski, November 3rd, 1921, in a place called Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania, just a bleak coal mining town. And his childhood was marked by just extreme poverty. He was, believe it or not, the 11th of 15 kids.
15.
15, in a Lithuanian Roman Catholic family. And imagine this, living in a cold water shack, so small the family apparently had to sleep in shifts, with coal car tracks running just yards from the door. I mean, a constant grinding reminder of their life.
Wow. Sleeping in shifts.
Yeah. And the hardship just got worse when his father, who was also a miner, died of cancer in 1933. Bronson was only 12.
12.
And that tragedy basically forced him straight into the lines. He started in the office, but very quickly ended up down in the mine itself. It was incredibly dangerous work. Cave-ins were common. He once said he earned about $1 per ton of coal, or maybe $1 a week for double shifts.
$1 a week?
Yeah, which, adjusted for inflation, is barely $24 today. It just paints this really stark picture of survival.
It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that level of deprivation. You hear these stories like him having to wear his older sister's dress to school because they literally had no other clothes.
Exactly.
Or his younger sister being fed warm tea because milk was just completely unaffordable. How does someone even come back from that? How did it shape him?
Well, those stories, as harsh as they are, they really highlight the intensity of the poverty, especially during the Great Depression. It must have instilled this profound self-reliance in him, a resilience that was just born out of sheer necessity. And what's really remarkable, despite all those massive challenges, Bronson was actually the first person in his entire family to graduate from high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a quiet kind of testament to his determination, even back then.
So, from the coal dust of Pennsylvania, his life takes this really unexpected turn with World War II. How did his military service fit in?
Well, his time in the mines ended when he enlisted. This was in the United States Army Air Forces back in 1943. And he served with distinction. He eventually became an aerial gunner on a Boeing B-29 Superfortress. Stationed out of Guam, part of the 61st Bombardment Squadron, he flew 25 combat missions against the Japanese home islands.
25 missions.
Yeah, and he was awarded a Purple Heart for wounds he received in battle.
Wow.
It's also kind of interesting. His accent was apparently so thick that his comrades often thought he was a foreigner. And he actually did speak Lithuanian and Russian, from his heritage.
Right.
So after the war, he just sort of drifted through various odd jobs until a theatrical group in Philadelphia hired him. But not to act initially, to paint scenery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that gig, as minor as it sounds, it turned out to be his way in. It gradually led to him acting in small roles. Eventually, he ended up sharing an apartment in New York City with another guy trying to make it, Jack Klugman.
No kidding. Jack Klugman.
The very same. Before he finally made the leap to Hollywood and started taking classes at the Pasadena Playhouse.
That's quite a jump, from painting stage backdrops to actually facing a camera. What were those first acting steps like for Charles Buczynski?
Oh, he definitely paid his dues, put in the work. Initially, of course, he was credited under his birth name, Charles Buczynski. His very first film role was tiny, uncredited, a sailor in a 1951 movie called You're in the Navy Now. Then a few other small parts in films like The Mob. The early 50s were just a blur of activity for him. Lots of small film roles like Pat and Mike. And he started getting onto early television, too. He even did a boxing scene on Roy Rogers' show.
Right. And there's one early role that always kind of jumps out at me, Igor. The mute sidekick to Vincent Price in that 1953 horror film House of Wax. Apparently, he even took sign language classes for the part. That seems like serious dedication for a character who doesn't even speak.
It absolutely does. It shows his commitment, even early on, even for what might seem like a minor role. And House of Wax, directed by Andre de Toth, it wasn't a small film. It was a huge box office success. Pulled in something like $23 million, made it one of the top films of '53.
Wow.
Yeah, and its cultural importance was recognized later, got preserved in the National Film Registry in 2014. So it was a really strong early credit for him, even though he wasn't the star yet.
Now, that same time period, specifically 1954, that turned out to be a massive year for Charles Buczynski. But for a totally different reason, right? Especially with the political climate in the U.S.
Oh, definitely. It was right in the thick of the Red Scare. You had Senator McCarthy, the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC. It was a tense time, and that's when he made a really significant change. His agent urged him to do it. He changed his last name from Buczynski to Bronson.
Well, Bronson, any particular reason?
Apparently, they were just driving around, saw a Bronson Street sign or the Bronson Gate at Paramount Studios. Different stories. But the why was clear. The fear was that a name like Buczynski just sounded too, well, Russian or Eastern European.
Right.
And that could seriously hurt his career prospects in that climate.
Right. The paranoia was intense.
Exactly. So Bronson it was. And after the name change, his career kept moving. He got roles in westerns like Apache and Veracruz. He also got his first lead role in a TV anthology episode in '55, and he started showing up regularly on Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Okay, so starting to get more notice.
Yeah, and then his first lead in a movie came with Roger Corman's Machine Gun Kelly in 1958. That really helped solidify his tough guy image, even in B movies. And then he starred in his own TV series, ABC's Man with a Camera, from '58 to '60.
So grinding out those leads in B movies and TV, then we see him start to transition into bigger projects. But maybe surprisingly, his first real taste of stardom wasn't in Hollywood, right? It was overseas.
That's exactly right. His career path really started to shift upwards around 1959. He got a pretty significant supporting role in a big-budget war film by John Sturges called Never So Few.
Ah, John Sturges. That name comes up again.
Yes, it does. Because in 1960, Sturges cast him in what became one of his most iconic early roles. He was one of the 7 gunfighters in The Magnificent Seven.
A classic. And didn't his co-star Eli Wallach say he was kind of a loner on set, kept to himself?
Yeah, that's the story. Wallach described him exactly like that, and the impact of that film, oh, it's huge. Especially looking back, he got paid $50,000 for the role, which was decent money then.
Yeah.
But interestingly, The Magnificent Seven wasn't a huge hit in the U.S. initially. It's kind of disappointed at the box office. But in Europe, it was massive, a smash hit.
Really? Europe got it first?
They really did. It ended up being hugely profitable because of its European success. And its legacy is secure, preserved in the National Film Registry in 2013. This period also saw him do some key TV work. He starred opposite Elizabeth Montgomery in a really memorable Twilight Zone episode called 2.
Oh, I remember that one. Just the two of them.
Exactly. And he even got an Emmy nomination for a supporting role in an episode of General Electric Theater. So he was definitely getting recognized for his talent.
Then just a few years later, 1963, another huge ensemble cast film, The Great Escape,
Right.
also directed by John Sturges.
Right.
Bronson's part of this incredible lineup playing WWII POWs. And this one wasn't just critically acclaimed, it was a massive commercial hit, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The Great Escape was a juggernaut. Grossed nearly $12 million, made it one of the highest-earning films of 1963, even got a Golden Globe nomination. It cemented his place in these big ensemble pictures. And that success was followed pretty quickly by another major ensemble war film, The Dirty Dozen, in 1967. Directed by Robert Aldrich this time. Bronson plays one of the GI prisoners trained for this basically suicide mission.
Another classic tough guy role.
Exactly. And another massive commercial success. It earned $7.5 million in rentals in just its first 5 weeks. It's still ranked, I think, 65th on the AFI's 100 Years.100 Thrills list. It had a huge impact.
Okay, so he's in these huge American ensemble films, Magnificent Seven, Great Escape, Dirty Dozen. But you're saying it was actually in Europe that he truly became a phenomenon first. How did that happen? What clicked over there?
It's fascinating, really. His European breakthrough just ignited around 1968. The French actor, Alain Delon, who is a huge star himself, was a big admirer of Bronson. Delon specifically sought him out to co-star in a French film called Adieu l'ami, or Farewell, Friend. And Bronson's agent at the time apparently made this pitch, saying something like, look, in America, all the money and publicity go to the pretty boys. But in Europe, the audience is drawn to character, not just a handsome face.
Interesting angle.
And it turned out to be absolutely spot on. WWII was a monster hit in France, earned around $6 million, which was huge then, and it just cemented Bronson's popularity. Suddenly, he was arguably the most popular American actor in Europe.
Wow. Just like that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that led directly to him being cast by Sergio Leone in Once Upon a Time in the West, also in 1968.
Right.
Bronson played one of the leads, harmonica. And famously, he had actually turned Leone down years before for the lead in A Fistful of Dollars.
Oh, right. He could have been the man with no name.
Exactly, but he took this role. And Once Upon a Time in the West achieved just immense international success. Sold millions and millions of tickets in Italy, France, Germany. It's now just universally considered one of the greatest Westerns, maybe one of the greatest films, period. And Leone himself called Bronson the greatest actor I ever worked with. High praise.
Incredible. So that European success just kept building.
Yeah, absolutely. Other European hits followed. There was Rider on the Rain in 1970, a French thriller that actually won a Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film, and more action films like Violent City and Red Sun with Alain Delon again and Toshiro Mifune. He was just massive over there.
So with this huge success across Europe under his belt, Bronson comes back to the States. And this is really where that definitive image, the iconic, granite-featured action star, truly gets locked in place.
Absolutely. He started this string of really successful action films, mostly for United Artists. And crucially, he began collaborating frequently with the director Michael Winner. They did Chato's Land and The Mechanic in '72, then The Stone Killer in '73. These films just cemented his action star status back home. And by 1973, Bronson had hit his absolute commercial peak. He was widely considered the world's #1 box office attraction.
Oh, #1 in the world.
Yep, commanding a salary of $1 million per film, which was astronomical back then.
Unbelievable considering where he started.
Truly. And then in 1974, at the age of 52, which is also remarkable,
Yeah.
came the role that is arguably his most famous and definitely his most controversial, Death Wish. Also directed by Michael Winner.
Right. Paul Kersey.
Paul Kersey, the New York architect whose wife is murdered, his daughter assaulted, and he turns into this crime-fighting vigilante. Now, the film was initially hammered by a lot of critics, called exploitative, simplistic.
Yeah, I remember the controversy.
Huge controversy. But audiences, they loved it. It was a massive box office phenomenon. Grossed $22 million, became one of the highest grossing films in the U.S. that year, and its popularity just exploded, leading to 4 sequels, all starring Bronson. It basically defined the type of character he'd play for much of the rest of his career.
He really owned that archetype.
He did. And he kept making other successful action films around this time, too. Mr. Majestic in '74, Breakout in '75, that one grossed $21 million on just a $4.6 million budget. Very profitable. And Hard Times, also in '75, directed by Walter Hill. That one actually got pretty good reviews. Roger Ebert called it a powerful, brutal film containing a definitive Charles Bronson performance.
So he was still a massive draw.
Oh, yeah. In 1975, he was ranked the 4th biggest box office star, just behind Robert Redford, Barbra Streisand, and Al Pacino. That's rarefied air.
Wow.
And he also started another long collaboration with the director, J. Lee Thompson. They made a whole bunch of films together, like St. Ives, The White Buffalo, Telephone, and later, several more Death Wish sequels.
What's really interesting to me, though, is that even though he got so typecast as this tough, silent vigilante type,
Yeah.
sometimes he deliberately picked roles that went completely against that.
That's true. It shows maybe a desire not to be totally boxed in.
Like in that 1977 NBC TV movie, Raid on Entebbe, he played the Israeli military officer Dan Shamron, not a typical Bronson role, and the film won a Golden Globe.
Right. A more straightforward, dramatic part.
And even more surprising, maybe, was Act of Vengeance in 1986. He played a union leader, Jock Yablonsky. And he made a point of saying, I'm not wearing a mustache, and I'm not carrying a gun. I don't perform any violence in this film. That's like the anti-Bronson.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
A conscious effort to step away from the image, at least for that project. It speaks volumes, really.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of fun to think about the roles he didn't get or turned down.
Oh, like what?
Well, he was currently considered for Superman, but they thought he was too earthy.
Too earthy for Superman, okay.
Yeah, and John Carpenter considered him for Snake Plissken in Escape from New York, but thought he looked too tough and too old.
Too tough for Snake Plissken. That's saying something.
Right. And maybe the most intriguing one, he apparently turned down a chance to work with the legendary Swedish director Ingmar Bergman.
Ingmar Bergman wanted to work with Charles Bronson.
Apparently so. but Bronson reportedly found the script dull.
Wow. Bronson turning down Bergman, that's a story.
It certainly is.
Okay, so moving into the 1990s now, we're looking at the final act of this really extraordinary career. And it seems like it was marked by, well, maybe some critical appreciation for him trying different things, and then eventually a quiet retirement.
That's a good way to put it. He famously declined the role of Curly in City Slickers, which Jack Palance won an Oscar for.
Oh, wow, he could have been Curly.
Could have been. But in that same year, 1991, he gave this really critically praised supporting performance in Sean Penn's film, The Indian Runner. Roger Ebert, who'd followed his career for so long, wrote this amazing review. He called it a performance of quiet, sure power. And he added, after his recent string of brainless revenge thrillers, I wondered if Bronson had sort of given up on acting. Here he is so good, it is impossible to think of another actor one would have preferred in his place.
That's incredible praise, especially from Ebert.
It really is. And this period saw him take on more of those against-type roles, particularly on television. He played the real-life newspaper editor Francis Vercella's Church in Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus.
Right, the guy who wrote the famous editorial.
Exactly. And in Donato and Daughter, a CBS TV movie, he played a cop, but critics noted he showed a warmer, more caring side as Dana Delaney's father. He even played the antagonist, Captain Wolf Larson, in a TV adaptation of Jack London's The Seawolf. Though apparently he had reservations about that one too much dialogue and playing a truly bad guy.
So his last starring role on the actual big screen, that was a return to the well, wasn't it? Death Wish V, The Face of Death in 1994. How did that final outing go?
Yeah, unfortunately, Death Wish V wasn't exactly a triumphant finale. The reviews were pretty harsh.
Ouch.
Yeah, critics mostly found it dull, maybe unnecessarily gory, and some even felt Bronson himself just looked bored playing Paul Kersey again.
A bit sad, really.
It is, in a way. His actual final acting roles came between 1995 and 1999. It was a trilogy of TV movies for CBS, Family of Cops, Breach of Faith, A Family of Cops 2, and Family of Cops 3. He played Commissioner Paul Thane, the patriarch of this family of cops.
Okay.
And that was pretty much it. His health started to decline in his later years. He had hip replacement surgery in August 1998, and that effectively marked his retirement from acting. Charles Bronson passed away on August 30, 2003. He was 81 years old. Died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in L.A. The death certificate listed several contributing causes: respiratory failure, metastatic lung cancer, COPD, and congestive cardiomyopathy.
A tough end for a tough man.
Indeed. He was buried in Brownsville Cemetery up in West Windsor, Vermont, near the farm he loved.
Okay, so we've traced this incredible arc through his career, his films. Let's shift gears a bit now and talk about the man himself. That powerful screen persona he created and the intensely private personal life he seemed to lead both seem so deeply connected to those incredibly tough beginnings. How did people try to describe that unique presence he had on screen? It wasn't just about action, was it? There was something else there.
No, not at all. And critics really tried to capture it. Stephen Hunter wrote a great description, I think. He said, Bronson oozed male life force, stoic toughness, capability, strength. And Hunter also pointed out this charisma of ambiguity. He asked, was he an ugly, handsome man or a handsome, ugly man? You were never sure, so further study was obligatory. I love that.
Ha, that's brilliant. Handsome, ugly man.
Yeah. And Hunter noted that while Bronson maybe wasn't a great actor in, like, the Laurence Olivier sense, he knew exactly how to dominate a scene quietly.
Yeah.
His nobility was stronger because it didn't need words. Bronson himself was pretty blunt about it. He told Roger Ebert back in '74, I'm only a product like a cake of soap to be sold as well as possible.
Very pragmatic.
Very. He said, I supply a presence. There are never any long dialogue scenes to establish a character. He has to be completely established at the beginning of the movie and ready to work. Just get the job done. And Michael Winner, who directed him so often, said Bronson had this quality that the motion picture camera seems to respond to. He has a great strength on the screen, even when he's standing still. There's a depth, a mystery. There's always the sense that something will happen.
It really sounds like that screen intensity, that toughness. It wasn't just an act. It was deeply rooted in his actual character, wasn't it? Scarred by that early poverty and struggle. How did that play out off screen?
Oh, absolutely. It seems it was an intrinsic part of who he was. There was a newspaper profile from 1973 that described him as quite shy, actually, and introverted. Someone who couldn't even stand to watch his own films.
Really?
Yeah. The profile said he was still suspicious, still holds grudges, still despises interviews, still hates to give anything of himself, still can't believe it has really happened to him.
Huh.
He apparently carried this real bitterness that it took so long for him to get recognition in the U.S. Roger Ebert even observed that, unlike some actors who just played violent characters, Bronson sometimes seemed genuinely intense, maybe even volatile, in person.
So this incredibly private, maybe somewhat suspicious, hardened man,
Hmm.
how did he navigate personal relationships? How did he build a family life?
Well, his personal life, like his career, had these really distinct chapters. His first marriage was to a woman named Harriet Tendler. They met when they were both young actors starting out in Philadelphia. She was only 18, he was 26. Harriet actually came from a more successful Jewish family, and she supported both of them while they were trying to get their acting careers going.
Wow.
Yeah. There's this sweet little story that on their first date, he only had 4 cents in his pocket.
4 cents.
4 cents. They had 2 children together, Suzanne and Tony. But they eventually divorced in 1965. Then came his most famous relationship, his second marriage, to the English actress Jill Ireland.
Right. They were married a long time.
They were. They married on October 5th, 1968, and were together until she passed away in 1990. And how they met is kind of legendary Hollywood lore. They met back in 1962 when she was still married to the actor David McCallum.
Who was Bronson's co-star in The Great Escape.
Exactly. And the famous story is that Bronson saw Ireland and flat out told McCallum, "I'm going to marry your wife."
No way. Did he really say that?
That's the legend. And, well, eventually he did. They created this big blended family. They lived in a huge Bel Air mansion with 7 kids in total, 2 from his first marriage, 3 from her marriage to McCallum, and then they had 2 of their own, 1 biological and 1 adopted.
Wow, 7 kids. That's a full house.
Absolutely. And Jill Ireland became his frequent leading lady. She co-starred with him in 15 films, which was apparently a very deliberate choice, partly so they could keep the family together while he was filming all over the world. They'd all travel together. They also spent a lot of time at their colonial farmhouse. It was on 260 acres up in West Windsor, Vermont. Jill Ireland raised horses there. It seemed like a real sanctuary for them.
That sounds idyllic, actually.
It does. But tragically, Jill Ireland battled breast cancer for a long time, and she passed away on May 18th, 1990. She was only 54.
So young. That must have been devastating for him.
Unimaginably so, I think. His third and final marriage came much later, in December 1998. He married Kim Weeks. She was an actress and had actually been an employee who helped Jill Ireland record her audiobooks during her illness.
Okay.
They remained married until Bronson's death in 2003.
What a life. I mean, the arc is just incredible, isn't it? From that crushing poverty, literally working in coal mines as a kid through the war, to becoming this completely unique, instantly recognizable screen presence, a global box office giant. His career was so defined by those tough action roles, the vigilante figure. But as we've talked about, there were those moments, those surprising departures into drama, into softer characters even.
His legacy is really undeniable, isn't it? He was a true cinematic force. That stoicism, that incredible ability he had to convey so much depth without needing a lot of dialogue. It just made him stand out. He really seemed to embody this particular kind of resilient, no-nonsense American grit. And that clearly resonated deeply with audiences all over the world, a quality that you just know was forged in the fire of his own early life. It's quite rare, I think, to see an actor whose screen persona feels so authentically connected to their personal history, their origins.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, perhaps the most enduring lesson from Charles Bronson's life isn't just about the iconic characters he played or the box office numbers. Maybe it's about that relentless drive, that quiet, steely resilience that was clearly forged in just extreme hardship, that spirit that just allowed him to consistently, get the job done, both on screen and off. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of unexpected resilience do you see, maybe, in the public figures you admire today? And what truly profound, shaping stories might actually lie hidden beneath the personas we think we know so well?